So just to start, I'd like to remind you that this session is being recorded and that the recording will be published on the EMA YouTube channel. So if for any reasons you don't agree with this webinar being recorded, I would recommend that you disconnect from the meeting at this point. Also note that we have set up a tool called Slido that you will be able to use to send your input or questions during the webinar. The use of this tool is voluntary, and you will be able to opt out to remain anonymous. But if you choose to use it, please be aware that you are accepting the use of your personal data, and you can find more information on this in the link at the bottom of this slide. Yeah, so to join Slido, you can either go to slido.com in your web browser from either your computer or your phone, or you can use the QR code on your screens and then type the meeting number, which is 3227006, as you can see on the screen. Now, once logged in, you can send questions or vote for other questions that you support. Questions will be displayed in the screen in the Q&A sessions, and any questions not addressed during this webinar will be answered in an FAQ document that we will publish in the Sport portal. Also, please note that after the Q&A, we will run a quick survey on the webinar. So we would appreciate if you could stay until there, and we would appreciate your participation there. Next slide, please. So before I start, just a quick introduction. My name is Jaume Gonzalez. I'm the business lead for RMS, which stands for Referentials Management Services. And today I'll have the pleasure to give to you an introduction to the RMS services and activities. So you are probably aware that this presentation is part of the SPO Week initiative, which are going to be mainly 4 days packed with webinars where myself and other team members from the Regulatory Data Management Service will cover all aspects of regulatory data management, and we will explain how the service works at present. Next slide, please. So the main goals of this session are to increase everyone's awareness of the RMS services and activities, to present to you what are the activities that RMS is currently busy with and what is planned next for RMS, and to show you how RMS is addressing the feedback received from customers. Next slide, please. So for today's webinar, we plan to cover quite a large number of topics, starting with a quick general introduction to RMS. I will then explain what are the processes in RMS, and I will give an overview of the change request process. After this, I will talk about the data quality management of RMS data. I will show you some statistics, and I will explain to you where you can find more documentation on RMS. Later in the presentation, I will give you an overview of how projects and systems are using RMS and what are the activities that are planned for RMS. To conclude the presentation, I will go through the key takeaways and conclusions from this presentation, and we'll have a Q&A session. The plan is to only take questions at the very end of the presentation, although some of my colleagues who are also joining, they might be able to reply in written while I present, but otherwise we'll have a look at those questions at the end of the presentation. And please do not forget, after the Q&A, there will be the survey. So let's start with the basics. RMS was created as a solution to implement ISO standards 11239 and 11240, which relate to pharmaceutical dose forms, units of measurement, pharmaceutical dose forms, units of presentation, routes of administration, packaging, and units of measurement for the identification of medicinal products. And it is essentially a repository of lists or controlled vocabularies and terms that are typically needed for regulatory purposes. At the time of this recording, which is April 2023, RMS contains 211 lists, and as you will see later in the presentation, these numbers have grown considerably since RMS was created in 2017. And these lists belong to different maintenance organizations, such as the DQM, WHO, MSSO, and also EMA. And we will see more details on this later. RMS replaces EUTCT and operates as a centralized and single source of referentials to support regulatory processes across the EU regulatory network and the pharmaceutical industry. And last but not least, when RMS went live in June 2017, it replaced EUTCT, which is the system that previously held all of these vocabularies, but a backward compatible API that mimics EUTCT was put in place to minimize the impact. Next slide, please. So as I was saying, as of this month, April 2023, RMS contains 211 lists, and these numbers are quickly growing. And these lists belong to different maintenance organizations. So with 191 lists, EMA is the owner of most of the lists in RMS. But RMS contains also other lists, such as the pharmaceutical dose form, the combined terms, the routes and methods of administration, and up to 16 lists that belong to EDQM. And it also has lists such as the language list from ISO, the MEDRA list from MSSO, and the ATC human and ATC vet lists from WHO. So in terms of business particulars for RMS, EMA can process and validate all change requests and create provisional terms as a result. RMS can finalize and approve change requests for EMA-owned lists and for change requests involving externally managed lists. The support team will need to liaise with the relevant list owners. Also, just as a reminder, the list information document, which we will talk about later, is one of the places where we can find details on who the list owner is, but this information also appears in the list of lists view in the RMS portal, as you can see below in the screenshot marked in yellow. Last but not least, for lists owned by EMA, if there is a specific subject matter expert to be consulted for those lists, then this information would typically appear in this list information document that I was just referring to. So I just referred to the list information document in the previous slide. So this is a good time to explain that this is a document which you can find in the RMS portal next to each RMS list, and it contains important practical information on each specific list, such as description, where the list is used, whether it belongs to the human or the vet domains, or perhaps both, who the list owner is, whether the list accepts changes, change requests or not, how the validation and approval processes work, etc. Next slide. So each list in RMS should have its own list information document, and you should be able to view it by clicking on the document icon that you can see marked with the blue circle to the right of the screenshot. Now, I will not explain in detail all of the functionalities in RMS, as there is an RMS web user manual under the document section in the RMS portal, which has comprehensive information on this. But I would like to give you a quick overview of what users can do in RMS. So in terms of searches, users can do simple searches. They can do more complex searches using filters, and they can save these complex search queries so that they can be used at any point in time in the future. Users can also browse the list of lists. They can view the terms within a given list. They can see the term details within specific terms, and they can browse the list information documents. RMS allows users to export full lists or specific selected terms or translations, with some exceptions as explained in my previous slide. And this can be done in either CSV or XML format. Users can search, view, edit, or delete change requests and can submit change requests to either create, update, or delete terms, or create or update lists. RMS also allows users to group terms within a list or across lists through the use of tags. It has a subscription functionality to inform users via email whenever the selected lists have been modified. Translations can be searched and viewed through the RMS portal, and NCA users can provide translations either online or offline. And more information on this can be found in the RMS web user manual. And as a final functionality, there is a documents area in the RMS portal, which contains important information, both of a general and technical nature, as well as information relevant for NCAs. In the next section of this presentation, I will talk about the processes in RMS. So if you can go forward to slides, yes. So the aim of this slide is to provide an overview of the processes to manage data in RMS. SPO users can either submit change requests to create or update lists or terms, or even to nullify terms, or we may get requests to enrich a specific list in the context of a mapping activity or an enrichment activity. The request can also be to perform some type of cleansing or to implement a delta update. So for example, an update of the ATC list or the Metro list. All of these tasks fall within the remit of what we call data stewardship. But EMA data stewards are also involved in customer service activities where they handle requests for information, requests for services, and incidents. In parallel, the business lead or product owner is involved in data quality management activities, such as quality control, where there will be a sampling and a check of the activities carried out in RMS. There can be data profiling, which can be done by monitoring and analyzing across the entire data set, and quality assurance by analyzing root causes of issues and implementing process improvements. Now, the business lead or product owner is also involved in the coordination of the service, and this includes data governance and IT delivery, and in performance management activities such as invoicing, KPI reporting, and customer satisfaction. In conclusion, data management processes are defined, operational, and they are monitored and reported on. And throughout the individual webinars that will take place this week, you will be able to learn more details on each one of the SPO domains. In the next section of the presentation, I would like to explain how the RMS team handles change requests for terms and lists. So the process starts with an RMS user submitting a change request to either add, update, or delete an RMS term, or to create or update a list. And this request should be accompanied by relevant supporting documentation. The next step is the validation phase, and here data stewards will check that the request is appropriate, that it's not a duplicate of another term or list, that the request has been done for the correct list, etc. And data stewards will use all available guidance and reference information, such as the list information document, to perform this validation. The SLAs for validation of terms are typically 2 to 5 working days. And for list change requests, it's 5 to 20 working days. Now, there are 3 possible outcomes out of this validation. If the request is not clear, the change request will be returned, and there will be questions for the requester to clarify. If the request is considered invalid, then the task will be invalidated. The reasons for the rejection will be explained in the notification that the user will receive, and any disagreements or questions post-rejection should be handled through ServiceNow, stating clearly the change request number for easy identification. The third outcome is if the request is considered valid. In this case, the term will be created as provisional, assuming that the request is for a new term, or the list preparation will start in the case of a list change request. Now, all valid requests will then go to the next step, which is the approval phase. This is a more in-depth assessment of the request, where subject matter experts will be consulted if necessary. The SLAs here are 1 to 2 months for term change requests and 2 to 6 months for list change requests. And we will see more details on this later. And there are two possible outcomes. Similarly to the validation phase, if the request is considered invalid, the task will be rejected. The reasons for the rejection will appear in the notification, and any disagreements should be handled through ServiceNow. And if the request is considered acceptable, then for term change requests, the term will be updated in the relevant RMS list, uh, or the list will be created or updated depending on whether it was an add list change request or an update list change request. Next slide. So here the top screenshot is just to show you where to find the change request section in the RMS web portal. And you can also see in yellow the buttons for submitting list change requests and term change requests. In the bottom screenshot, you can see the general information that is required to submit a term change request. Now, in the screenshot in the next slide, you can see the information on the actual, sorry, on the actual term that should be populated in the change request, which corresponds to the common attributes. And as you can see, hopefully marked with a red asterisk, is basically the mandatory information. In the next slide, you can see in the top screenshot how to search for specific change requests. And the bottom screenshot is an example of results when searching for specific change requests. Next slide. So as mentioned a few slides back, RMS requests go through two different steps. First is a validation step where data stewards check for completeness. They check that it's the right type of request, etc. And then in the approval step, this is a more in-depth assessment of the request, and it's where SMEs may be consulted if applicable. In terms of term statuses, when a term request is submitted, it is stored in RMS as draft. At this point, the term is not published yet, so it cannot be seen at all by external users. And when a term passes validation, then it is published as provisional. Now, when provisional terms are approved, the status becomes current. And when provisional terms are rejected, their status becomes nullified. Also, in the case of terms which are no longer recommended for use, and this may happen, for example, in legacy products, for instance, the status of those terms should be non-current. And in this case, ideally, a current term should be used instead for regulatory purposes. Now, in terms of how term statuses fit into regulatory procedures, industry should submit applications using only terms which have status provisional or current. Now, in certain regulatory procedures, such as variations or other post-authorization procedures, industry can submit applications using non-current terms. And before finalizing the assessment, NCAs should check the term status and should ensure that only applications using current terms are approved. In the next slide, the next section, so in terms of data quality management for RMS, as you can see in this slide, there is a proactive component and a reactive one. So starting perhaps with the reactive one, RMS has customer service support, and in this work stream, the team will look into data quality defects, which can be major, and examples of this could be duplicates or terms that have been published in the wrong lists, or they could be minor, such as typos, capitalization issues, etc. And any identified defects or errors will be corrected. The acceptable limits for this type of errors are less than 5% for major errors and less than 10% for minor errors. And the RMS team will also address any data quality incidents that may be reported to service desk. If we now look at the proactive part, so to the left of your screens, there is quality control performed to 100% of the outsourced RMS activities, such as Delta uploads and change request tasks. And we have recently started creating profiles to identify data not complying with data quality rules. KPIs for this data profiling are being developed, and the plan is to have reports from this data profiling around the second and third quarter of this year. There is also a quality assurance work stream where we analyze root causes for data issues and make process improvements whenever possible. Next slide, please. So this slide is just to show you the type of data quality errors that we may find in RMS. As explained earlier, minor errors that we may find either when addressing data services or in RMS change requests are incorrect standardization, typos, issues with capitalization, or issues with extended attributes. And this could be either data quality errors that we find in our data or errors that data stewards themselves may have introduced as processing errors. In terms of major errors that we may encounter both when performing data services or via a change request, these could be duplicates, terms created in the wrong list, or terms with missing essential information. For example, an ATC name that doesn't have an ATC code associated to it. It could also happen that change requests are incorrectly rejected or approved, and this would be considered as a major processing error. Let's now have a look in the next slide at some RMS statistics to give you an idea of the amount of work and the magnitude of growth in RMS. So as you can see in the left graph, there was an increase of almost 3,000 terms in 2022 as compared to the previous year. And this was mainly linked to the creation of new lists for several EMA projects and all the maintenance activities, such as mapping activities required for PMS implementation. If we now look at lists on the right chart, the massive increase of 40 lists in 2022 had to do with several projects, including PMS, IRIS, DADI, AZU, real world data, EPI, and the ESMP shortages projects, mainly, which had important terminology requirements. So overall, we can conclude that this surge in demand for new lists definitely contributed to the milestone of 200 lists that we reached in January this year and that we are very happy with. In the next slide, if we take a look at the number of change requests in 2022 compared to 2021, there was a decrease of 14%. And the main reason for this is that work streams such as the Article 57 to RMS mapping activities required for PMS implementation, the EVVET3 implementation and UPD implementation activities actually peaked in 2021. And by 2022, these activities were already completed. So we think that this is why the workload stabilized in 2022. In terms of overall compliance for change requests, and this is the right part of the on the right part of the screens, almost 100% of change requests were resolved within the agreed SLAs in 2022. Now, in the next slide, if we look at change requests per request type in 2022, there was a general decrease in most types. And this again is linked to the completion of Article 57 to RMS mapping activities, as well as UPD and EVVET3 implementation, which peaked in 2021. If we look at change requests per status on the right part of the slide, the approved change requests continued to be the main status in 2022, and only 13% of change requests were rejected, which represents a 17% decrease when compared to 2021. In the next slide, on the left graph, you can see the top 10 lists with the highest number of change requests received. And on the right graph, you can see the top 5 lists with the higher number of change requests rejected. The rejection rate has undergone an important improvement with time, with a 12% in 2022 versus a 22% overall since RMS go live in 2017. And in parallel, the number of change requests received has increased significantly with time. So we had 480 change requests received in 2022 versus 400 requests in 2021 versus 206 requests in 2020. So if we consider these two facts together, we can conclude that this is very positive for the service. Having said this, we notice that some lists are rather popular and cause many rejections. So for instance, the units of measurement list is the second highest list in terms of change requests received, and it's the number one with most rejected change requests. And the manufacturing activity list ranks as the 10th highest list in number of change requests received and has a rejection rate of more than 60%, which is very high. And that's basically 27 requests rejected out of 43. So with this in mind, we would like to encourage users to familiarize themselves with the list information document that I was referring to at the beginning of this presentation, as these documents provide useful information and should help avoid some of the rejections. In the next slide, let's have a look at the number of at the service desk tickets. So on the left graph, you can appreciate that the number of service desk calls received in 2022 were in the same rough order of magnitude as in 2021. And most tickets concern questions on mapping of referentials, term details, on how to get access to Spore, how to update lists, how to provide translations, also on the export of lists, and versioning in RMS, amongst other topics. The overall compliance in 2022 for service desk tickets was 75%, which is, of course, lower than desired. Having said this, it's probably worth explaining that RMS only received 72 tickets in the whole 2022, 13 of which could not be quickly resolved due to IT dependencies and limitations, which impacted overall SLA calculations. So with this in mind, we can conclude that the number of customers impacted by this compliance was limited. In the left graph, this is to put into perspective the frequency of data quality incidents in RMS. As you can see at the bottom of the pyramid, at the time of this webinar, RMS contains a bit over 128,000 terms, and there are close to 15,000 users registered. In the first half of 2022, and I'm mentioning only the first half because this is the data captured in the customer satisfaction survey that I'm referring to. Only one data quality incident was reported. So if we now look at the number of SPOR users, the data tells us that only 0.006% of users reported data quality incidents, as there was only one data quality incident reported by the more than 14,000 SPOR users. And if we now look at the number of terms in RMS, we can virtually conclude that 0% of the terms triggered data quality incidents reported by users, as there was just one data quality incident reported for the more than 128,000 terms published in RMS. With this in mind, we can conclude that the level of data quality incidents in RMS is extremely low. Now, moving to the right graph, in terms of customer satisfaction, data services and data quality in RMS were positively rated overall, with 78% of the users rating data services as good or excellent, and 86% of the users rating data quality in RMS as either good or excellent. Now, next slide. Yes. So at this point of the presentation, I'd like to show you where you can find more information on SPOR and RMS. So going from left to right, you can find information on SPOR, including important documentation, as well as a general introduction to the SPOR projects and the RMS project vision on the EMA corporate website, and you have the link to this in this slide. The EMA account management portal is another important resource for creating a new EMA account to get access to SPOR in case you still don't have access to it. And by the way, there will be a presentation on this topic on the 20th of April in the afternoon. The SPOR portal is where you will find important reference documents such as the RMS Web User Manual, which provides guidance on SPOR services and functionalities, the SPOR User Registration Manual, the SPOR affiliation template to register the first industry super user, and the RMS new list template, amongst others. On the EMA YouTube channel, you can find training videos on both RMS and OMS, which include tips and questions raised by users. and you can see the link in the slide. And last but not least, ServiceNow should be used for service requests, issues, or if you need any technical support. Next slide. So as mentioned earlier, in the corporate website that you can see on the left part of this slide, you will be able to find background information on RMS, as well as information on sport projects, including RMS and the RMS vision. And the EMA account management contains instructions on how to register users and how to use the IAM tool. If you need step-by-step instructions for RMS, you will find them in relevant presentations in the sport portal, and you will find videos on this topic on the EMA YouTube channel. In the next slide, you can see the documentation area of the portal, which you can access by clicking on the view option under the Documents tab that you can see marked with the red arrow. And here you will find a lot of useful documentation, such as presentations of RMS webinars. And as I was mentioning, you will find the recordings of the same on the EMA YouTube channel, guidance documents on processes such as the RMS operating model, the quick reference card to submit change requests, or the published SLAs for SPORE. You will also find information on SPORE and Q&As such as the RMS web user manual or performance-related documentation, such as the customer satisfaction survey. Next slide. Yeah, so documents that will be useful before you start working with RMS are the RMS web user manual, the Sport Q&A, and the introductory webinar to RMS, which was held in September 2022. Important documentation concerning access are the Sport user registration manual, the RMS web user manual, and the Sport user affiliation template letter. In terms of API documentation, you will find the Spore API access and usage, the Spore API access Q&A, and the presentation from November 2021 on Spore API access. Concerning the change request process, you can find details on this in the RMS web user manual, the RMS new list template, and the quick reference card for RMS, amongst others. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, you will find videos of RMS webinars on the EMA YouTube channel, and in the RMS portal, you can find the corresponding presentations. And last but not least, the SPOR dashboard that you can see in the right screenshot corresponds to ServiceNow, and this is for any help needed and not found in documentation. So for instance, to request support with an RMS change request that cannot be submitted via the portal, or to report a technical issue with the use of the RMS portal, or the RMS API, or to address concerns with the data in RMS. Next slide, please. So we're getting closer to the end, and in this section, I'll briefly describe how RMS is being used in projects and systems. So I will not go into too much detail here in the sake of time, but the line at the top of this slide in blue, it represents the full life cycle of a product. And you can see marked with green stars the areas or processes where referential data is being consumed. And the yellow stars represent areas or processes where integration with RMS is planned. In the table at the bottom of the slide, you can see all the systems that are being integrated, an explanation on whether the data held in those systems corresponds to the human or the vet domain, and a description of the regulatory processes covered by those systems. So in summary, you can see that RMS is being used and integrated with more and more systems and processes. So this is the last but one section of this presentation, and here I'd like to give you a quick summary on the RMS activities that the RMS team is busy with at the moment, and also to show you what is planned for the future. So starting from top to bottom, on the customer service front, we have already started working towards the simplification of the incident management process, and the expectation is that this is concluded towards the end of mm, second quarter of this year. Regarding data management, we are in the process of doing knowledge transfer as we are outsourcing certain RMS activities, and this is planned to go on at least Q3 this year. This will include at least the handling of change requests, Delta updates, ServiceNow tickets, and the preparation of list information documents. Still within data management, we plan to publish revised SLAs for list updates towards the second quarter of this year, as we think that the SLAs should have more granularity for a better service. And in the third quarter, the plan is to achieve daily synchronization between RMS and Exhibit PD, as this is essential for PMS implementation. Last but not least, also between Q2 and Q3 this year, we plan to offer the possibility for NCAs to provide translations via change requests, and I will cover this in more detail later. On the data quality front, the 80, still in the, this slide, please. Thank you. On the data quality front, the ATC Human, ATC Vet, and Medra version 26.0 were already updated during the first quarter of this year. And the Medra 26.1 and Vedra updates are planned around Q3 this year. At the beginning of the year, there were several lists created for the real-world data catalogs, which is a project where RMS has been deeply involved. For Q2 2023, we will very probably publish the EMDN list, which is a catalog of medical devices owned by the European Commission. And this is a list that is probably going to be needed for several projects and teams at the EMA. And although this needs to be confirmed, there could also be requirements for new lists in RMS for CTIS, but as mentioned, this is to be confirmed. Data quality is planned to be improved in Q3 this year through data profiling and monitoring, as well as by adding descriptions to terms that are missing these descriptions, and also by specifying current terms for non-current terms whenever available. In terms of RMS documentation, the plan for Q2 this year is to complete the review and publication of the RMS master list document, which is basically a document which contains a list of all of the lists captured in the RMS portal, and has important information such as creation and review dates. It also specifies what systems are consuming each list and a few other details. In addition, we are planning to do a holistic review of all list information documents, and we plan to publish any missing list information documents, as we are aware that some lists in RMS are missing it. Towards the last quarter of the year, there is a plan to create an RMS pipeline document detailing all the planned activities for RMS. Now, with regards to RMS awareness, there are 4 webinars planned for RMS this year, including the one that is taking place at this moment. There will also be one webinar dedicated to the process for publishing lists and another one to explain how NCAs can submit translations in RMS. There is also a work stream on modernization of data and information management. And here the focus will be on making improvements both on the infrastructure as well as on technical aspects. There are also some bug fixes planned starting on Q3 2023. And these range from issues with the generation of RMS exports, with the formatting of these exports, to issues with the MedroSoc information, and improvements of the Spore API, amongst others. So in terms of planned service process improvements for this year, the first one, which I briefly mentioned earlier, is the daily synchronization of RMS and XCV-MPD, as this will be required to ensure the successful implementation of PMS and EIF, as failure to follow this process may result in synchronization issues with products and issues with the use of the electronic application form. The plan is to start creating in RMS and EuroVigilance all the terms from the relevant XCV-MPD lists in Q2 this year, to block the creation of proposed terms in XCV-MPD at some point in the future to be confirmed, and to perform deltas to create terms in RMS until the creation of proposed terms in XCV-MPD is blocked. The impact that we expect for users by implementing this is that they will need to get familiarized with requesting terms in RMS, as the creation of terms in XCV-MPD is planned to be discontinued at some point to be confirmed. The second planned improvement is the possibility for NCAs to provide translations via change requests of the type list update. And the reason for this is to support NCAs with translations as an alternative to the traditional bulk upload or the provision of individual translations. This is planned to start in the second quarter of 2023. And the process envisaged is for the NCAs to be able to submit change requests of the type list update and to attach to the change request the Excel template with the needed translations. And then the next step will be for the EMA team to upload those translations in the system on behalf of the NCA. The impact expected for users is for them to have improved support, which should help ensure making the translations available in the RMS portal as soon as possible. Next slide. So the next planned improvement is to provide faster updates to external lists, such as the ATC Human, ATC Vet, the MEDRA and the VEDRA lists. And this should minimize the number of change requests received and should improve user experience when browsing and consuming these lists. The plan is for these lists to be updated within 1 to 2 months of publication by the list owner, and this should be starting as of this quarter. The next planned improvement is the implementation of data profiling and data monitoring processes, and this is to improve RMS data quality. This can be achieved given the increased RMS resources, which should result in increased checks of data quality. The plan is to build reports of data quality aspects to look at. So for example, if there are non-current terms without replacement terms, or if there are terms without descriptions, or terms without translations, amongst others. This activity is planned to start also in Q2 this year, and we are also expecting to be able to create a process to monitor, inspect, and correct data on a weekly basis, starting in Q3 this year. The impact foreseen for users is that they should see an improvement in data quality in RMS, hopefully. The next improvement was triggered by feedback received in the customer satisfaction survey, and the plan is to provide additional RMS documentation and of improved quality. Concretely, there are 3 actions linked to this. The first one, which is planned for Q2 this year, is to publish the master list document that I was referring to earlier, which would consolidate in one single document all the details and information for all lists in RMS, and it would also contain all subsequent updates that may take place for any of the lists included there. The second one, planned for Q3 this year, is to publish a what's new or a news document containing information on topics or items that are under discussion or for implementation. And the third action planned throughout this year is to review all list information documents, as we are aware that some of the information can be improved, and to publish any missing list information documents. The expectation is that improving supporting documentation should also help improve awareness amongst RMS users. Now, in the next slide, please. The next initiative is to implement versioning in the RMS API to improve user experience and to enhance the capabilities of the RMS API. The plan is to allow users to retrieve historical term versions via API, and the expectation is that this is achieved in Q4 this year. And the last initiative is the implementation of the Medra API, and this is mainly to improve data quality and to ensure up-to-date currency of data. The idea is that in the future, RMS consumes the Medra updates via a live synchronization with the Medra API instead of us performing the Medra 6 monthly updates, which is what we are currently doing. There's an assessment and feasibility study of this measure that started in Q2 this year, and the implementation is expected to take place in the last 2 quarters of this year. Next slide. So as mentioned earlier, one of the initiatives is to provide faster updates for external lists. At the moment, the SLAs for list updates are 2 to 6 months after publication by a list owner. So for instance, the Medra list is updated twice a year in March and September, and the ATC Human and ATC Vet and Vedra lists are updated once a year. In the colored chart that you can see in the bottom part of the slide, you can see the number of days that it took the RMS team to publish the ATC Human, ATC Vet, and Vedra lists in the last 3 years. So as you can see, for all of these lists, the publication times have been reduced since 2020. With all of this information in, by the way, the Vedra 2022, yeah, I will need to check that. I'm not sure why it's missing. I will check that later. With all of this information in mind, we can safely conclude that RMS team is updating external lists within the agreed SLAs, and that publication times have been improving over the years. Having said this, and as next steps, the RMS team will focus on completing these updates in a shorter period of time to minimize impact in consuming systems. And you can see a revised proposal for list update SLAs in the next slide. So if you can move to the next one. So here you can see the details in the 2 tables to the left of the slide. But just to quickly summarize these planned improvements, for the faster validations, which include, for instance, the update of externally managed lists such as ATC Human, ATC Vet, and Medra. The plan is to reduce the validation time from 15 to 20 working days to 5 to 10 working days. And there's a plan to inform users about the foreseen SLAs in the sake of transparency. Concerning the new service mentioned for uploading of translations, the proposal is to upload these translations in 1 to 2 months. We also plan for faster and more targeted completion of list updates. And in the sake of efficiency, we propose more granular scenarios as opposed to just one SLA for the wide category of list update change requests. So in particular, for the update of externally managed lists, such as ATC or Medra, where all changes have already been approved by the external list owner, the proposal is to reduce the approval time from 2 to 6 months to 1 to 2 months. For the update of lists which do not require consultation with the list owner or the subject matter expert, we want to reduce the SLA the same as the previous case, so from 2 to 6 months to 1 to 2 months. And for the update of lists which actually require consultation with the list owner or with one or more subject matter experts, the proposal is to keep the current SLA of 2 to 6 months. And the main reason for this being that these consultations typically tend to be lengthy and sometimes require several rounds of discussions. So this takes me to the last section of my presentation, where I will summarize the key takeaways and conclusions concerning RMS. So the first takeaway message is that we are dedicating many efforts to increase awareness of RMS activities. I have given you an introduction to the RMS services and processes, including the change request process and service desk. I have explained how the data stewards in RMS deal with change requests, and I have described the customer services in place and their excellent performance. I have provided you with updated statistics on RMS, and I have explained how RMS is integrated in business processes. I have also shared with you what are the current unplanned activities for RMS, which include the daily synchronization between RMS and EV, the new RMS service to upload translations via change request, the revised and shortened SLAs, particularly focused on list update change requests. And also I explained what are the planned user experience improvements, mainly on the areas of basically documentation in the portal and API, as well as data quality. And last but not least, we have reviewed how RMS is addressing customer feedback, and this is twofold. In the first place, there is a new data quality management process in place, which includes data profiling and data monitoring. And in the second place, there is a plan to update and improve the currently existing documentation in RMS. Next slide. So, as mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, this presentation is part of the Sport Week, which is a 4-day, which is 4 days of webinars where myself and my team colleagues from the regulatory data management services will cover all aspects of regulatory data management, and we will explain how all of these services work presently. This has been the third session of the Sport Week, and as you can see below, there are another 5 sessions scheduled for the rest of the week. The next session being the OMS session scheduled for 2 p.m. this afternoon. So this is the end of my presentation. So at this point, I would like to thank you very much for your patience and attention. And I think we can now move to questions. Before that, I want to remind you that at the bottom of the slide, you have the Slido details to log in case you want to submit your questions. And also, please remember there will be a survey just after the Q&A. So at this point, Miriam, I don't know if you want me to share the screen or perhaps so that I don't jinx it, do you perhaps want to share it? Just let me know how you would like to proceed to show the questions. Okay, so how the ATC code gets updated to RMS database? Would EMA enrich the ATC code from the WHO directly? Okay, so this is twofold. We do yearly enrichments with the yearly updates that come directly from the source, from WHO. But in addition to that, because these updates only happen once a year, if there is a need for a specific ATC code which has already been published as provisional by WHO, the RMS user can submit a request, like an ad hoc change request for us to publish that code. And we can do that before the official yearly update takes place. Now, can an improvement of the sport website performance be context of data quality defects, as well as for list updates versioning? Let me read that one again, once again, because I'm not sure I understand this question. Can you provide definitions for major and minor, both in, okay, I think I covered this in one of the slides. This was covered in one of the slides. Let me just look for that slide. So minor issues, we mentioned incorrect standardization, typos, capitalization issues, and issues with extended attributes, for instance. And then as major issues, we mentioned duplicates, terms created in the wrong list, um, essential information missing, and we gave the example of, for example, an ATC name that is published in RMS, which is missing the ATC code. This is slide 24, so you will be able to see this in your own time. Now, can an improvement of the sport website performance be expected? This site is extremely low. It takes a lot of time for the pages to be displayed. Yeah, this is not in the remit of RMS, but I think I can mention that this is a very big priority in the sport team. So performance of the system is being looked at and is actually being given priority because we know that this is a big one. Now, does EMA proactively enrich the indications metro code from metro list to RMS, or MAH has to submit formal request for addition of indication to RMS? So I haven't gone in detail into each list, of course, because we have more than 200. You can find this type of information in the list information document, but to particularly address this question, we don't make any alterations to the metro list because we are not the owners of this list. So we just replicate whatever comes from MSSO. This is the agreement that we have with them. So any need for new indications or any need for updates of any already existing metro terms should be directly handled directly with MSSO. Does RMS fetch data from XCVM and vice versa? No, there is no live synchronization between the two systems. We do have manual synchronization, and this is something that we are, let's say, intensively working on as PMS implementation is approaching. We need the two systems to be as aligned as possible. So no, there is no live synchronization. What is the process for correcting major errors such as duplicate. Do you nullify the duplicate or delete it? Deleting could produce issues for downstream consumers. Absolutely agree. So there may have been in the past instances where we actually um, deleted, actually removed the term from the database, but we are aware that these indeed may trigger errors. So the agreement is that if there's a need to nullify terms, we actually nullify them. That means we update their status to nullify it, but they will remain in the database. So the ID will remain there, so to speak, and the trace will remain there so that we don't break anything. At present, when we request a new value in RMS, as example for storage condition, we have the answer. Possibility to review and expand this list is being discussed in the context of PMS implementation. When the update of lists will be possible? Do you keep tracking of the request or just close it? I think we got this question yesterday as well. I remember it. This needs to be followed up on a case-by-case basis because each list has its own, let's say, governance and rules, and each list is in a different progress status, so to speak. Particularly for storage conditions, it is true that this is also one of these important lists for PMS. Um, I don't think there's still a final decision on whether additional terms will be published for this list. What I can say is that an umbrella term was created a few months back precisely to address this issue. So you will be able to see a term that says something like um, further storage details in the SPC or something like that. So that was the result of lengthy discussions with the PMS colleagues. So you have that term in the meantime in case you don't have the exact value that you need. And please bear with us because PMS discussions and discussions on whether the content of these lists will be expanded are ongoing. Is it correct that if we want to add an ATC code, we apply for it through the data steward? We have official ATC codes for Germany in our SPCs, but they are not listed in WHO ATC list or EMA. Can the EMA add the official ATC codes from the yellow list or the white list to their list? Okay. Let's chunk it piece by piece. Yes, any requests for ATC codes have to be okay. If it's official WHO ATC codes, they have to be requested to WHO. In parallel, we can also receive requests for the ATC list. Now, if they are not official ATC codes, we also have a list in RMS that we created because for legacy purposes and for PMS implementation, there are a lot of products in the system which don't have official ATC codes associated. They are, let's say, national ATC codes. So there is also a place in RMS for those type of codes. So the short answer is yes, we have a place in RMS for both WHO official and also non-WHO official codes. And please do follow up with RMS data steward. So submit a change request and we will properly handle your requests. Today, we created a provisional ATC code in EV Web and in SPOR RMS for an ATC code accepted by the WHO, but not yet published. Can we continue to add a new provisional ATC code in EV Web? I don't deal with EV Web. I'm not sure if any of my colleagues has already replied to this or if they want to step in. Otherwise, I'd prefer to follow up after the meeting because I'm not sure of this. We can follow up in written. Now I'll skip to the next one unless anyone wants to step in. So Medra data in RMS, is the identifier identical to the low-level Medra code? So the Medra terms in RMS contain the Medra IDs as well. So they have two codes. We have the RMS ID and we have the Medra ID. The low level, it will depend. I mean, I think there's 4 levels in Medra. Whatever the Medra ID is from the source, you will be able to see that in RMS as well. I hope this addresses the concern. Next one, searching functionality of a list term is a bit complex and not straightforward in RMS database. Is there the possibility to have a simplified search in RMS like Excel list? I guess so. I mean, lists can be exported, or most of the lists can be exported. So you could always export the list that you're working with, and then perform searches in the in the exported Excel. But I would be happy to follow up with you after the meeting, as I'm interested in understanding what the actual issues are and what the complexities are. Do we have only the current Medra LLT terms in for RMS? No, we should have everything, the current and the non-current as well. Everything should be there. Because as I mentioned, we don't remove records from RMS. So whatever MSSO nullifies, then that should show as non-current or nullified in RMS. Are there mandatory RMS lists that NCAs should translate? Not from the RMS point of view. There might be, for the sake of other of the implementation of other projects, you as NCAs might be perhaps asked to translate lists. I don't know about this, but from the RMS point of view, um, the sport team is not responsible for translations. Translations are, let's say, optional, and they are the sole responsibility of NCAs. So the functionality is there for NCAs to be used. So NCAs can feel free to go there and add whatever translations they want. We can certainly help with any technical issues that you may experience in the process, but we will not comment or assess on the completeness or accuracy of any translations, and we don't consider, we will not determine if there's any mandatory or non-mandatory lists. Do EMA, yeah, I think the one on the top we already, yeah, perhaps someone else will comment on that. Do EMA update translations of referentials proactively, or do MAH has to take any action in submitting translations to RMS? Okay, industry should not be involved at all in translations. This is for NCAs only, and as a matter of fact, industry should not have rights to provide any translations. Now, EMA doesn't typically update translations in RMS because of what I just mentioned. This is typically work reserved to NCAs. Having said this, there might be the occasional list which is solely used by EMA, and we might want to add translations in there, but I would say this would be, an exception really. Please explain more about management of external lists and corresponding change controls by EMA. Okay, so typically external lists are not owned by EMA. So what we will do is basically not alter the content at all. What we will do is we will replicate the content from the source. Yeah, so this is what happens with ATC Human, ATC Vet, and Medra, basically. So we replicate whatever we get from them. Perhaps I don't want to overcomplicate this, but perhaps just very quickly, the exception would be the standard terms list. In the standard term lists in RMS, we do have all of the content from EDQM, who are the owners of those lists, but we also have an agreement with EDQM that the list in RMS may also show mainly non-current terms, which are basically terms not recommended by EDQM, but which are anyway used in approved products. And the reason that we publish them is because we need them in the systems, because otherwise the IT systems will not work. So that's let's say the exception, and this is agreed. This was agreed with EDQM, and it's clearly explained in the list information document. So any questions on that, please follow up with me after the meeting. Is it possible to extract all RMS lists in one shot and not one by one separately? Not that I know of. If this is essential to you, please raise a ticket through service desk and we will assess the possibility of having this, but I don't want to promise anything that I don't know if it can be done. But for sure, it's not possible at the moment. I think these two I've already taken. Is there anything else? Doesn't look like it. Okay, we still have some time left. Shall we give it perhaps 2 or 3 minutes to see if there are any other questions coming? So let's wait. Yeah, let's wait another 2 minutes. Oh yeah, there's the survey as well. Okay. Miriam, whenever you want, I don't know, shall we wait 1 or 2 minutes and then we go for the survey?
Less than that.
Okay. Yeah, so whenever you want, I mean, yeah, users can anyway send questions on the Slido in the meantime. So whenever you want, go ahead with the survey. Thank you.
Okay, I don't think we have anything else that hasn't been answered related to this webinar. So if we can maybe proceed with the survey, if you have 1 minute for us, maybe if you could give us your feedback, which is really much appreciated because it helps us to improve. So anything that you would like us to improve or you liked about this webinar, please let us know. We will leave this poll open until 11:45. So if you would like to do it later, please feel free. Thank you.